Here we are. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Went back to the old set. I actually had to, I had to set it up real quick, because this set used a lot of files that were lost when I lost my hard drive a few months back. But it seems like everything's in working order. So in the first place, I'm very tired. It's been a long weekend, but you know, I finished clipping today, so that's a victory. And another chill stream, just kind of help get us back into it. I also means I finished editing the Fortnite stream. I had to rest in pieces, indeed. Rest in pieces. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I had to finish editing the Fortnite stream, and I got all that uploaded. And so we're good. I don't really have a plan for this week. I have a lot of things that I need to take care of, and I'm putting all of them off. So we'll see how long I survive. I'm barely joking. But today, our first late night back, we're gonna do two things. We're gonna do an art stream in a bit, but the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a live reaction to the Persona 4 and Persona 6 trailers. So news has been floating around a lot about both of these. And last time we did one of these, it did relatively well. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Persona 4 first, because I don't think I'm actually going to have a lot of thoughts, but I want to see it. So we'll fade out. Get this going. I have not seen either of these trailers. I've not seen anything from them or about them, other than that people said Yukiko looks good. So, let's see what we got.
You ever heard of the Midnight Channel?
Domino might have been on that Midnight Channel before she died too.
Ooh. Sorry. People
Channel
were
before
clowning
she
on the
died, too.
graphics. Look at this. This is beautiful. You can tell they've rezzed it up since the initial trailer. Persona games have never... No one's ever honestly called them ugly. That much is definitely true. And I love the way that they've rendered Dojima and Adachi here. They both look fantastic. The new generation has treated them very well graphically. What was that? Sorry. That is a weird pose for Yosuke. Why is he perpetually hitting that? Why does his pose make him look like he's calling me an unk? Why does it look like he's saying I'm chopped? This I do not approve of. Yosuke got hit with the stupid stick, I think.
Now, where are we?
Oh.
Again. The graphics are going to be the thing people talk about the least, because it's the one thing you can't really get up in a tizzy about. Everyone knew this game was going to be gorgeous, and sure enough, it is.
Feels like we're someplace totally different.
So it's just like, the graphics in the cutscene sections are so good that the 2D animated sections that used to be the highlight of every Persona game look low res in comparison. This is significantly lower resolution than the cutscene right before it. They're putting all their money into the 3D modelers, not the 2D animators. In fact, they may even, I might be wrong, they may even be reusing this cutscene from Persona 4 Golden. I now have a Pepsi to go with my popcorn. Thank you, Sips. But yeah, I don't know if they're reusing this 2D animation, but it almost looks worse. It looks worse than the 3D animation, and it might be reused from Persona 4 Golden.
Look out!
Now then.
I like this aesthetic. I like this aesthetic. I think it pretty seamlessly combines the best aspects of both the Persona 5 UI and the Persona 4 UI. I like how it looks like an old dial, almost like a old-time television dial. It very much is consistent with the themes, and you can even tell around the background it looks like it's a TV screen. It's very consistent with the imagery that's always been associated with Persona 4, and I appreciate that.
Whatever's going on here, we're getting to the bottom of it.
To wield a persona is to wield direct control.
She's looking gorgeous. Gorgeous as always.
Is to wield direct control of one's heart. And the heart
Even Igor got a glow up.
through bonds.
Oh yeah, I think they might be reusing some assets from Persona 4 in some of these sections. This piece of animation is significantly higher res than the last one.
Doesn't it sound
There's
cool?
Yukiko, best girl.
Someone had to see that.
Yosuke, he deserves to be clowned on for this pose. I kind of hate it. He should not be calling me a chopped unk.
I'm glad it was you.
Was that supposed to
Oh, Chie looks so cute in this art style. I didn't care for Chie's old design. I like this. It's very cute.
be him?
Good times never.
So before, when the last trailer came out,
Was that supposed to be him?
people were clowning on this because it looked lower res. You can tell that they've resed it up since the last trailer. Could they do a little bit more? Sure, they probably could do a little bit more, but not much more. The graphical complaints were always the least sensible.
I hate you, sneaky.
Yeah, Marie definitely benefits from the glow up. I don't think there's anything I can say with my wife within earshot. No, Marie's always been adorable. And the high-res 3D models and the updates to her sprite.
Stupid bully jerk.
Although I don't like the voice acting in that. The English voice acting, it needs to be faster. I don't think I appreciate her English voice actors. It's not stupid bully jerk, it's stupid bully jerk. You know?
Can't wait.
So, shall we?
Ooh, Naoto. Ooh, I really like Naoto's 3D model. That's very nice. Very sleek.
Really? So neat.
Come on, don't call me that.
I like how the 3D models are more modern in terms of their style, modern to the current state of the Persona franchise, whereas the 2D sprites are more consistent with Persona 4's historic art style. I appreciate that.
Originally born from humans. Well, then that means Senpai got killed by her other self.
No! Get out of here!
Chie looks
Look at
great.
me! Does that mean you're just gonna...
Chie's glow up stands out to me because I never really liked her all that much.
stuff me
And so,
back in your
I-
head and pretend I'm
She
not
looks so good. Ooh, that's clean.
Alright. Which means that we also gotta catch whoever's tossing people in here.
I think I'd like to help too. I'm not running away from this. Well, but I have no problem taking down shadows. It's over!
So yeah, I'll be counting on you, partner. Then let's team up and catch this jerk.
I like how they're doing the gang up attacks. Because in the older games, it is just like a Looney Tunes cloud of smoke. February 27th, alright. So we'll fade that out for a second. Realistically, I don't have any notes. And this is why I did this first, just to kind of get it over with. I was talked about this in one of my last Persona videos, when we were doing the teaser trailer. It makes sense why they're doing Persona 4. People were saying, like, why are they doing a Persona 4 remake as opposed to a Persona 1 or 2 remake? Because those are the ones I really needed. And the answer is because this is so much easier. Persona 4 is already a 10 out of 10 game. All they have to do is up the res. And it looks like that's all they're doing. At a glance, it looks like that's all they're doing, which is all they should do. Persona 4 is already about as close to perfect as it can be. So the graphical updates, that's all you gotta do. That is all you have to do. Persona 1 and 2 are a bit more, are very different, because not only do they need overhauls to their gameplay, they also need overhauls to some of their content, because even though people like me, I would rather see it the way it is, realistically, with the way the industry is now, Persona 1 and 2 need much heavier localization and censorship. I am not advocating for localization and censorship. I am saying that Atlus is going to want more censorship and more localization for those titles. So it's not just giving it a graphical update and finding voice actors. It's an actual overhaul of the game and its writing. This, they just need to put a new coat of paint on it, and it seems like that's all they're doing, and that's all they should do. Let's hope they don't mess with it too much, because I know, I have it in my notes for a video essay, and I probably will do it on Naoto and Kanji and the way that they're treated, because frankly, people will say, people on the right, people who would ordinarily agree with me will say things like Kanji's not gay, Naoto's not trans. It's like, no, they are. And that is to our benefit. Kanji is a man who struggles with same-sex attraction, and he overcomes it. Naoto is a woman who struggles with gender dysphoria, and she overcomes it. I hope they don't downplay that. Although, in fairness with Kanji is slightly more ambiguous. Naoto is not ambiguous. Naoto struggles with gender dysphoria. There's no way around that. Kanji it's at least left ambiguous. But what is certainly true is that by the end of the game, he no longer deals with same-sex attraction. That is true. Whether he ever deals with it is questionable, completely debatable. But he doesn't deal with it by the end of the game. That is true. But that is Persona 4 Revival. And before anyone, I know everything I've said. Sorry, Trud. They will rewrite it and include a pride parade in the credits. They may. They may. They very well may. I have heard people say that the Japanese version treats those things differently, and in the Japanese version, it's clearer that Kanji is not gay. But Naoto is trans, and I feel like that definition needs some qualification because people mean different things when they say it. But Naoto is a woman who struggles with gender dysphoria who overcomes it, and just saying that, oh, well, it's actually her struggle is purely feminist and about struggle with the workplace it's below room temperature IQ. She got on a surgery table and asked to be turned into a man. That's not workplace struggle. That's not struggling with the workplace. Anywho, I could go on a whole tangent about that, but I'll leave it at that. Naoto is a woman who overcomes gender dysphoria. That gender dysphoria is related to her treatment in the workplace. But it's almost like saying, that guy's not a transgender. He just has struggles with his father and he just has struggles with his father and his male mentor figures. It's like, yeah. Why do you think he trooned out? Yeah, those things are correlated. It doesn't just happen out of the blue. But anyway, I did that first because I figured I'd have the least to say, and sure enough, I do. But before anyone just calls me a consumer, I may not buy this game. Not because it's bad, but because I already own Persona 4. And so at that point, I'm just paying $70, $90 to have a game that I already own with better graphics. And so then the question becomes, how much am I willing to pay for the same game with better graphics? Depending on my money situation, maybe I am willing to buy it. But it's a maybe. It's a maybe, but it is a smart money-making decision for Atlus, not only so that they can capture all of the people for whom graphics are a big deal, but it can also introduce a lot of new people to the franchise, particularly post-Persona 5 people. Although the post-Persona 5 people are the people that really just need to be excised from the Persona fandom. They just need to be excised completely. Which is probably about as clean of a segue as we're going to get into Persona 6. I am worried. I have not... We'll watch the trailer in a second. I am worried, and I have extreme reservations about Persona 6. To the point that a friend of mine and I even have almost a nuclear option for potentially trying to work on our own alternative to Persona if Persona 6 ends up being terrible. The reason that I'm afraid is because the divide between... I'll pull up the music that I muted. The divide between... You mean like making your own video game? Yeah, potentially. Potentially. I have drafts. I do not have the ability to make a video game on my own, because I know nothing about programming or 3D modeling. But I have drafts. If you told me to sit down and start writing, I could. Anyway. There's a stark divide between Persona 5 and everything that has come out afterwards. Persona 3's central theme was self-sacrifice. Persona 4's central theme was learning to differentiate between falsehood and reality. Persona 5's central theme was self-expression. That everyone has a right to self-expression, and anyone who prevents you from expressing yourself is an oppressor who deserves to be overthrown. Which, to be blunt, I don't think you could get a pure essence of leftist theology than that. Then that self-expression is the fundamental good, and anyone who robs you of your right of self-expression is an oppressor who must be overthrown by any means necessary. I made a short a while back, and it did very well, and I was actually surprised by how much positive feedback I got on it, because typically critical shorts do not do very well in that regard. They usually get a lot of angry commenters, and I did get angry commenters. Reminds me of Assassin's Creed. Yeah. Because it is a very similar ideology, because, well, the people who made those games have the same ideology. But, some people say that bad ideas begin in Europe and then come to America. I think that's broadly true. Bad ideas start in Europe, they come to America, and then America, through our cultural hegemony, spreads them to the rest of the world. And so that's why, 2012 Japan, things like that were largely unthinkable, but now it's fairly normal. you know? It wasn't that long, Persona 4 came out, and they were making fun of Kanji for being fruity. But Persona 5 is just sort of definitionally leftist, and when I made this short, I made the offhanded comment that Persona 5, the people in Persona 5, Sips, you would have heard me say this before, that they kill. They just kind of kill the people that they go after. Now, when I said that in the short, it was somewhat taken out of context. I was being deliberately inflammatory, I suppose. I was exaggerating on purpose. And I explained in the VOD that I understood that's not what was happening, but I was making a point. But that clarification got cut out of the short because it needed to be under a minute. And so I had a few people point out, you know, they don't literally kill the people. Like, yes, I know that. I obviously know that. But I don't think you understand the ramifications of what's happening. Because whenever the people in Persona 5 go after someone, they understand that there is a chance that they are going to kill the people that they're going after. They understand that there is a non-zero chance that they will directly cause the death of the people whose hearts they're stealing. Which, when you're talking about some of the big bad guys, is kind of morally irrelevant. You're talking about people for whom it would be justified to send them to the slaughter. But then when you start thinking about people like the guy whose only crime was stealing credit for art, the guy whose only crime was being a capitalist, or God forbid Futaba, or the detective, people who we know are good people, the Phantom Thieves were being definitionally reckless. Definitionally reckless, and they were going after people. At a certain point, they were just kind of going after people for not doing things the way that they want them to be done. Like, okay, sure, the guy's a corrupt politician or whatever, but what's your alternative? The guy's a corrupt businessman, but what's your alternative? How are you actually going to solve corruption? Or are you just going to kill everyone who disagrees with you? Because that's not a solution. Not really. And it is a kind of death. It is a kind of death. And the point, which I think is accurately made with Persona 4 on the screen, is that the whole point of Persona 4 is you're supposed to come to peace with your shadow. I have an essay in the works on this too. In Persona 4, the shadow cannot be destroyed. That is made very explicit. The shadow cannot be destroyed, and your only option is to make peace with it. Persona 5 rejects this. It goes out, it admits the shadow can't be destroyed, but it can be purged in a sense. Destroyed, and what that effectively means is that the person on the other end is robbed of their free will. The person has become a bad person because of their choices, and then at the end of it, they're just brainwashed into being a good person. You've effectively removed that person's agency, their free will, which is a kind of murder. That is a kind of death. That person is a fundamentally different person. We talk about things like stream of consciousness, that what you call the self is a stream of consciousness, and if that stream of consciousness should be disrupted, there's a confusion as to whether the two separate parts of that disruption are the same person or different people. It's the teleportation dilemma. When you teleport, if you were to theoretically teleport, have your atoms dissolved and rearranged, that is a break in the stream of consciousness. So is the person on the other end of the teleporter the same person, or is it just a new person made of the same material and memories? In purging the shadow, what you have done is you have disrupted the stream of consciousness and created what is effectively a new person. A new person with the same memories and the same body, but a new person nonetheless. Wouldn't that be directly acting against the theme of the game about freedom of expression? So they'd be hypocrites, right? Well, if leftists didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have standards at all. That's the short of it. It's like saying, you know, leftists are all about freedom of expression, then why do they clamp down on people for saying mean words? Isn't that a kind of expression? And the answer is, yes, it is a kind of expression. Your mistake is in assuming that they have any actual values, instead of just saying whatever is convenient in the moment to get their point across. When the vigilantes in Persona 5, the Phantom Thieves, when they go after people for oppressing their freedom of expression, it's not because they think freedom of expression is inherently good. It's because their freedom of expression in particular is being suppressed. And that's all they care about. That's why they can justify going after the life of a guy whose only crime was stealing credit for art. That is the through line between all of the people that the Phantom Thieves go after. It's not people who are corrupt, it's not murderers, it's not rapists. The through line between all of the people that the Phantom Thieves go after are people they don't like. Other than Futaba, which again is a whole nother disturbing can of worms, because they could have killed that girl. They could have sent Futaba to therapy, but instead they decided to surgically remove the bad parts of her personality. Which could have killed her. And almost did. Futaba is my favorite character in that game, and even I think it's BS. She needed therapy. But to the point at large, they didn't actually kill anybody on purpose, so they at least have this sort of plausible deniability, where when we talk about the self and the disruption of the stream of consciousness, and whether that's a new self entirely, whether that constitutes a murder, that's a philosophical argument. And to be frank, if you're a utilitarian, and you think the only thing that matters in an action is its outcome, then yeah, obviously that's a good thing to do. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with surgically removing the evil parts of a person's personality? Well, it disrupts their free will, yeah, but so what? They're evil. And it's like, yeah, I agree with you that they're evil, but then that raises moral concerns about how you define evil. How do you define evil? What are your limits? What are your restraints? Which was my whole point in that short I mentioned earlier, about why the Persona 3 and Persona 4 protagonists wouldn't get along with the Persona 5 protagonists. Because Persona 3 and Persona 4 are both stories fundamentally about self-restraint. Persona 3 and Persona 4 both have moments where the protagonists could use their powers for selfish ends, and they don't. They are both fundamentally about responsibility, and they both coincidentally end with the protagonists joining what is effectively a kind of police force. The main character of Persona 4 becomes a detective, and the main characters of Persona 3 create an organization made for hunting down villains that works in cooperation with the government. And after the event of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, some of the cast of Persona 4 joins that organization too. So having rogue Persona users who are just going after anyone that they very arbitrarily deem to deserve it, that's obviously a problem. It's obviously a problem, and it's obviously unsustainable. It's unsustainable. That can't go on. Like, what's the limit? Would the Phantom Thieves go after Trump? You know, like, we would all be fine, I think, with the Phantom Thieves going after someone like Kim Jong-un or Xi Jinping, but what about when they just start going after politicians whose only crime is thought crime? What happens then? And if you were to say, well, they wouldn't do that, I frankly don't believe you, because they did... Frankly, they did that shit for less. But there's at least a layer of plausible deniability. Any plausible deniability that the franchise had was thrown out with Metaphor ReFantazio. Because Metaphor ReFantazio makes it all extremely explicit. In Persona 5, it's like, does it count as death? Is it really killing? Is there really any moral equivalency there? And in Metaphor, they just straight up kill people. They just straight up assassinate their political opponents. And I've had people try to justify it. They say things like, well, they deserve it. Like, yeah, I agree they deserved it. I agree. I agree, but that's a very shallow mode of thinking, as well, the person deserved to die, therefore we got to kill him. That's a very shallow mode of thinking, especially in a game about politics, because newsflash, if you assassinate your political opponents, now assassination is on the table, which means if someone comes around and assassinates you, you can't complain. If Persona 5 development post-succeeding election, I think they would be. It's plausible. It's plausible. I could easily see an alternate Persona 5 ending where the game ends with them saying, we're going to America, or something like that. Or, like, American president is visiting Japan, and they're like, oh yeah, let's get to work. But on Metaphor, people will say, well, they deserved it. They did deserve it. That doesn't mean it's not an endorsement of political assassination. And people say, well, it's just because sometimes when the system doesn't work, you need to go outside the system to make meaningful change. Like, yeah, that's the justification of every assassin ever. That was the justification of John Wilkes Booth. That was the justification of every political assassin, attempted or successful. And it's especially damning because, similar to Persona 5, the only thing that the protagonists directly condemn in Metaphor ReFantazio is religious and racial discrimination. At the end of the game, we're talking 100 hours in here. We're talking 100 hours in to Metaphor ReFantazio. One of the main party members who had been in the game from the beginning turns to the protagonist as they are about to fight the final boss, and they say, hey protagonist, what are we fighting for? And the protagonist says, I don't know. That's in the true ending, by the way. The only thing that Metaphor can identify as being evil is religious and racial discrimination. And nothing else. There's no other principles. And even those principles are very shallow because the game itself specifically says that good and evil do not exist. Good and evil don't exist, except apparently for bigotry. Which I don't think there's any way to read that except for good and evil don't exist. It's just if you disagree with me. And so there's just this consistent trend where they try to justify it. What they do is they make the villains awful people so that you don't object to the way that they're treated. They make the villains awful people so that you don't object to the fact that the only reason the protagonists are going after them is because they personally don't like them. Not for any philosophical reason, not for any large, moral, upstanding reason like that, because they personally disagree. In Persona 3, the guy we went after was trying to literally end the world. So yeah, we were kind of justified in extreme measures there. We were kind of justified in extreme measures. When we fought the villain in Persona 3, who was trying to end the world, and we didn't even want to hurt him if we could help it. The same is true in Persona 4. Persona 4, we went after a murderer. The main villain is a serial killer. And even at the end of the game, the main characters are insistent that we are not going to kill this guy. Because justice is a primary theme in Persona 4. The main character is the son of a police officer. He says this guy has to face justice. Even if we can't prove his crimes, even if he gets acquitted by the law, he needs to face justice in a proper trial. We are not the judge, jury, and executioner. And then in Persona 5 and in Metaphor ReFantazio, they say, yeah, no, if you disagree with us, we're straight up gonna kill you. Yeah, if you try to get in our way in any capacity, we might just kill you. Because that's another thing in Metaphor specifically, is they never try to find another way. They never do. Similar to Persona 5, how in every time the Persona 5 heroes go to steal someone's heart, they are resolved to potentially kill that person. Even if they don't actually kill the person, they are resolved to kill the person. Because they understand that by doing what they are doing, there is a chance that that person will die. And the same is true in Metaphor. Every time the Metaphor people fight someone, they are resolved to kill. It doesn't mean that they end up getting the kill, but they are resolved to kill. They are perfectly willing to. In fact, if in the game you express as the protagonist a fear or a moral shame or guilt about potentially killing someone, the game shames you for it. The game shames you for it, telling you not to let it dull your blade. And so it's very troubling, and it's one of the reasons why I want to do these longer essays, because there's more to it than that. Persona 3 and Persona 4 are good games, not just because of their graphics, not just because of the characters, not just because of the gameplay, not just because of the music, but because they have genuinely good themes attached to them. And then in Persona 5, you literally summon the devil. You literally become Satanel, the adversary of God. That's what Satanel means. Satanel means adversary of God. It's just... What gets me especially about Metaphor ReFantazio is just how... It's not only that it's wrong, and that it has a bad morality attached to it, but that it's shallow. Persona 5 at least has a little more depth, but it's shallow. It's wrong and it's shallow. Bro, what? I didn't know that, lol. I never played it. I have, if you go on my channel, Sips, I have 2 videos on Metaphor ReFantazio under the analysis section. Both of them are taken from VODs when I played through Metaphor, because I 100%ed that game on stream. All the VODs are there. I do not recommend you watch them. Oh, because I don't... Oh, God. Lord have mercy. That was a waste of 130 hours of my life that I'll never get back. But I have 2 analyses of Metaphor ReFantazio. They're both taken from streams. They're not scripted in any way. They're just edited versions of stream rants, like what I just said. Like what I just did. But yeah. It's bad. It's really bad. And I have a few shorts on the subject, too. I was there for some of it. I must have missed that part. Yeah. Like I said, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But that... I might get some angry comments for that when I upload this, but... that is the short version of the story. The long version is like a series. I have like maybe five videos that are theoretically planned. One that breaks down the Christology of Persona 3, one that breaks down at least one, maybe two, that break down Persona 4 in a vacuum, but also Persona 4 as it relates to Persona 5, and how Persona 4 and Persona 5 treat the concept of shadows differently. And then Persona 5 deserves its whole own video. And Metaphor could easily become two videos. One video specifically on its political implications, and then another on its philosophy, but realistically they'd probably be the same video. Because when you get down to it, the morality of Metaphor is that might makes right, and if I'm stronger than you, I get to do whatever I want to you. Because there's no such thing as right or wrong, there's only what I want and what I'm willing to do to get it. There is no other takeaway from Metaphor ReFantasio. You can say that's not what the writers intended, and I'm sure it's not, but that is what they wrote. That is what's on the page, regardless of whether they intended it. Take the music away. As I bring in the new window. I have not seen anything about this trailer yet. I've seen nothing. It's only a minute long, so we'll see how much we actually get out of it. Rain. Fog. Already ooh, in the gravestones too, already I'm getting Persona 3 vibes with the midnight hour, especially with the soft green color. It's very Persona 3. Getting real spooky with it. Yeah, I'm definitely getting flashbacks to the midnight hour. Okay. I kind of wish I wasn't a VTuber right now so you could see my face. So you could see the face that I'm giving this. First of all, it might just be because I'm on a Wild West kick, but this gives me like super Wild West vibes. Like as if this were a saloon font. Almost like a wanted poster font, and this almost looks like the back end of a bullet. So, breaking it down, we're in a graveyard. There's weird staticky film grain. It's all very Persona 3. I'm going to look up something really quickly. The Dark Hour, that's what it's called. I had a brain fart. I'm very tired. It's very Dark Hour, what with the sort of pale green light and the emphasis on graves. And we're also, I've pointed out immediately that Atlas doesn't seem to be able to escape Christian imagery, which is something that's true in all of their games. It's true in all of them. But it's especially true in the Persona franchise. Persona 4 kind of escapes it a little because Persona 4 distinctly focuses on Japanese mythology. And when you dig into Persona 4, there's a lot of callbacks and references to Japanese mythology, and it runs deep. It runs really deep into that game, and it's really cool. But they've never been able to really escape this kind of imagery. Like Shin Megami Tensei is rife with biblical names and imagery. Persona 3, you literally become Jesus. Persona 3 has a very intense Christology. Christ is very much at the focus of Persona 3. The protagonist gets literally crucified at one point. And of course, Persona 5 is the same thing. The final boss of Persona 5 is Yaldabaoth, who is from Sethian Gnosticism, a Christian heresy. Ironically, given current discourse, a heresy suspiciously similar in some respects to Mormonism. That's beside the point. Basically, where Yaldabaoth is a fallen angel who presides over the earth. Basically a proto-god that represents corrupt authority. And the protagonist becomes Satnel, literally Satan, biblically accurate Satan. And then in Metaphor Fantasia, when you fight Louis, he turns into an image of Jesus, which is meant to be more so a callback to Lucifer, a Luciferian image of a demon appearing in an angel of light. They just can't escape the Christian imagery. So not only are we in a graveyard full of Christian gravestones, which in fairness, the Japanese association of Christianity with graves is actually extremely appropriate. This was in the news fairly recently too. A current debate debacle between native Japanese people and Muslims, because Muslims insist on burying their dead, but Japanese is a cremation country. Historically, Christianity, specifically Catholicism, is the same. Historically, we have insisted on burying our dead, although in modern years, those requirements have gotten a little bit more lax. But there is if you see a graveyard in Japan, chances are that's a church graveyard. Japanese prefer cremation. But what's interesting is, so we go up forward, and there's a statue of a headless priest. At first I thought it was Mary, but you can tell by the vestments and by the way I think the hands are positioned here, that is a statue of a priest. It's all very spooky. Well, with the curling trees and all that. And again, this color is ripped straight from Persona 3. I think in Persona 3 it's maybe slightly more blue, but greenish blue is the color associated with the Dark Hour. And of course the Dark Hour itself is a play on the Witching Hour. This idea of spirits raising up at midnight. So then we move up here, and we have what is clearly some kind of zombie. I think that's what's meant to be implied here. And it's reaching out towards the statue of the priest, implying that this is the priest himself. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was something like the first boss of the game. And then as we move through here, this gives off very much Persona 4. Persona 4 was going after a serial killer, so we might be going after a serial killer too in this game. Or we might be going after some kind of rogue Persona user or something. But what's also interesting is, so this shot here with the fingers, yeah. What this immediately reminded me of was... Won't let me snooze ads. What this immediately reminded me of was the Sistine Chapel. That was what immediately came to mind, but it's also pointed in it's almost accusatory. It's almost like an accusation. But I think it is also a reference to the Sistine Chapel. I think it might be both. So it could be that in this game we're going after a serial killer and we have a false accusation. But I think it might also be about man's desire for God as a central theme, because that's what the God and Adam represented. It's God reaching out to man and man kind of only giving a half effort reaching towards God back. And so immediately seeing the desecrated statue of a priest, my immediate takeaway is that a central theme of this game might be man's desire for God in a world which seems to be without meaning. That is my first takeaway. We have what looked like it's almost like a combination of Persona 3 and Persona 4. Persona 3, but with the Dark Hour and the more spooky vibes, and Persona 4 and what is clearly meant to be evocative of like a crime scene. with the red lines, the accusations. The red lines, the accusations, the flipping letters, like it's a typewriter or a bulletin. Here's my first prediction. One of the changes that Persona 5 made to the franchise is it focused on shadows in isolation from the greater self. Persona 4 treated shadows as definitely being a part of the person and being inseparable. But Persona 5 sort of implied that they are separable, at least to a certain extent. And so I think what this game might deal with is I think this game might deal with people who are raised from the dead because their shadows got incited. Because this sort of facial reconstruction here, it is evocative of like a in the first place, it's evocative of like a serial killer, something a serial killer would do, or trying to make a face. But what it also reminds me is it reminds me of Frankenstein. That's what it does. It reminds me of Frankenstein. It reminds me of taking different pieces of different corpses or different people and slapping them on to make a new person. So it could refer to someone who has multiple identities or someone who has absorbed multiple identities, but it could also be evocative of, say, someone who is a shambling dead, and when he rises from the dead, he doesn't have a face, and he has to construct a new face, something like that. Ooh, that's an idea. Especially with the sort of accusatory hands motif. It could be something like an invasion of the body snatchers. Like an invasion of the body snatchers kind of deal, where something is taking over people and people are trying to figure out who, almost like a witch hunt. Where chaos is being sown from people stealing other people's identities, which that also leads back to the face. Oh, that's a scary shot. The face, the idea that there's something that's pretending to be human. That's what that reminds me of, almost like the what was it, like the Mandela Files and some of the some of the analog horror tropes. The idea of there being invaders or invaders, monsters disguised as people walking amongst us. And not only the fear of those monsters that disguise themselves as people, but also the fear of our fellow man who, in desperation and fear of those people, those monsters, are turning against each other. And then in a lot of like those analog horror stories, you have sort of the lingering wonder of whether the monsters are real at all or whether it's just people turning against each other, yada yada. But I think that is my prediction. I think my prediction is that there's going to be... We might see the return of the Dark Hour. But what it might be is it might actually be... Maybe it's like when shadows kill people, they possess them. Something like that. Or maybe it's a single person disguising himself as multiple people. That person could be undead, or he could be raising people from the dead. But I think even if dead people or zombies isn't actually a thing, I think you're going to see that motif where the shadows are going to take on that role, even if they're not actually undead. Those are my predictions. And I think of the two themes that currently are in my head are either or both. It could be both. A, the search for God in a world which seems to be meaningless, which is hinted at by the pointing fingers derivative of the Sistine Chapel and by the fact that we begin in a graveyard with a statue of a desecrated priest. Almost like a Nietzschean horror story where God is dead and we are our own masters, and how terrible that actually is. And possibly related to that, paranoia and the fear of our neighbors. Hopefully it's not just xenophobia, that would be really boring. but actually like fear of our neighbors, fear of people disguising themselves as ordinary people. Because zombie games are, the theme of a zombie game is fear of the mob. It's fear of the mob. It's fear of people in general, and specifically fear of the masses as people who are mindless and easily influenced. But this is more like a fear of imposters. Almost like especially with some of the red here, I get uh I get throwbacks to like the age of McCarthyism and accusations of communism and communist spies. That's what it reads to me as a kind of witch hunt. There are people in this world who are not as they seem, and the hunt for the people who are not as they seem is almost as bad as the threat itself. That's the vibe that I get. Another thing, like with this face, like this reconstructed face specifically, is it gives off vibes that there could be a prevailing theme of identity, which could tie into the consistent modern persona trends of self-expression and discovering your true self, especially with the notion of masks that gets traded through Persona games. Because in Persona 3, it's stated that your persona is a mask, and in Persona 5, it's inverted. That your persona is who you are when you take the mask off. This reads as a kind of mask in that sense. Almost like a man of many faces, that kind of impression. But I think one of my more concrete predictions is that people will inflame the shadows of recently dead people and bring them back to life. But when they come back to life, they will come back to life as shadows empty of the rest of their self. It will just be the shadow isolated from the greater whole. That is my prediction. Especially since what with this sharp green color, we're going into like solid Ghostbusters territory. With like the flame and almost the slime aesthetic. It's Ghostbusters. It is very Ghostbusters. Which honestly good for them. I hope they lean into the horror elements. But those are my predictions. Those are my predictions. In terms of what I was talking about earlier, I don't really have any immediate thoughts as to whether it would continue the trend of persona or metaphor or not. I do see things that are very typical, extremely, almost eye-rollingly typical of Atlas, like again, the image of the desecrated priest. That is just, that reeks of Shin Megami Tensei. It reeks of Shin Megami Tensei. But it does actually give me some hope, because in Persona 5 they frame God as being the enemy. It is unavoidable. They obviously Yaldabaoth is a product of Christian heresy, but Yaldabaoth, he uses angels to fight. The accusation in Persona 5 is that God is inherently corrupt. That if there is a God, that God is inherently corrupt, because basically Persona 5 thinks power is corrupt. I think the writers of Persona 5 would probably assent to the statement that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so since God is an absolute power, he would be absolutely corrupt. I think that's the argument that they would make. But just based on this image alone, rather than showing God as an enemy, it portrays God as being dead and irrelevant. And also that God being dead is a bad thing. It's a horrific thing. It's not a good thing. That's what this imagery says. But this is just a teaser trailer, so there's no telling how much of that will actually carry into the game. But there's a decent chance that the Dark Hour will return. There is a decent chance. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to go for an hour. Tell you what, we will swap over to art as planned. I'll probably only go for maybe 30-40 minutes, but we'll chat for a while. I don't have a bedtime. My work is in the evenings, so it really doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me much. Other than all the things that I need to do that I'm putting off doing. But that's what we'll do. We'll take a quick break. I'll use the bathroom, and I'll get the art stuff set up. And we'll go for another 30 minutes or so. But I think if I were just to capstone the Persona 6 stuff, I am cautiously optimistic. It seems like either, this is kind of interesting, it could go one two directions. Either it's going to be retreading ground from the previous games and really playing on some of the stuff that we already explored in Persona 3 and Persona 4 about shadows and how they interact with the world and the sort of apocalyptic nature of shadows and what can happen when they go off the rail and start dealing with reality. Or it could be something entirely new, because I see shadows of themes of identity, but I also see a kind of Nietzschean horror about the death of God. And I see things about fear and paranoia and fear of your neighbor, but that could also just be twisted into a general rambling on xenophobia, which would be the worst. Because God knows we need more stories about how racism is bad. There clearly aren't enough of those. But I'm cautiously optimistic. We may continue this discussion in return. See you in a bit.